What's up, Green Bay Packers fans? Welcome back, and as always, thank you for joining me. My name's Paul Brettel. Today we're here to discuss the upcoming game against the New Orleans Saints, specifically how the Packers have the opportunity to clinch a playoff spot, but that important detail doesn't have their attention at this time, and we're going to talk about what does. But first, you know what to do. Hit like on the video, hit subscribe on the YouTube channel. I do greatly appreciate it. You can find me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel. Find all my work over at ESPNLacrosse.com, including the article version of what we're discussing here today. And for my Wisconsin sports fans, Packers, Brewers, Bucks, Badgers, download the 105.5 ESPN Lacrosse app, Wisconsin Sports Radio, all day, every day. You can find me on Sports Lead Monday through Friday, 3 to 6, multiple days per week. So like I said, Packers have an opportunity to clinch a playoff spot this Monday night against the New Orleans Saints. The easiest path to doing so is going out there and winning the game. There are, I think, one or two other scenarios where they could clinch if they don't win, if they get some help from Atlanta, the Rams, some combination of which of them losing would also get the Packers in. But easiest way, go out and win. Packers have a playoff spot. Obviously, an important game in that regard, right, to be able to clinch a playoff spot in what is a very, very talented NFC conference. But as important as that might be to the grand scheme of the season, and obviously it's that next step, right, in terms of pursuing the Packers' ultimate goal, which is getting to winning a Super Bowl, at this moment, today, that does not have their specific attention. Why? They're focused on getting better today, focusing on the day-to-day details from attacking practice, as LaFleur said, as continuing to establish the right habits, focused on improving. And if you do those aspects right, if you just focus on what's in front of you in the moment, whether it's your player and it's your rehab, it's the team meetings, it's using your downtime to study film, it's on the practice field. If you focus on those individual moments and executing those individual moments to the best of your ability, executing those finer details at a high level, the bigger picture stuff, making the playoffs, is going to fall into place, right? That's the thinking behind it, right? You do the little details correctly in your preparation, then you get to Sunday or Monday in this case, and the execution on the field is then going to start to take care of itself because of, again, the work and the preparation that you put into it. So really what the Packers are chasing right now is consistency. And that's something I know we've discussed here before. It's something that has eluded the Green Bay Packers this season, putting together that full 60-minute, four-quarter performance. And I think this past Sunday's game against the Seattle Seahawks is a great example of that, where you're watching it, you look back on it, and you go, there's a lot of good that happened in this game on both sides of the ball. But you can also look at it and go, there's some areas of improvement as well. And so the Packers realize that. They recognize it. Get into it here in a second, but that lull from the offense in the second half, come playoff time, that cannot happen. Those are the type of moments or possessions string together in a game that will send you home in January. So there are certainly things that this team still has to work on, and there's a lot of positives out there as well. But again, mastering the mundane, the day-to-day details, the stuff you got to do as part of your daily process to put yourself in a position to be successful, mastering those components takes care of the big picture. Matt LaFleur said, you get the details right, when the opportunities present themselves, you'll capitalize on them. And yes, is that coach speak? 100%. Does Matt LaFleur know that if they win Sunday, they clinch a playoff spot? Absolutely. Does Matt LaFleur know where the Packers sit in the grand scheme of the NFL playoff race right now? Absolutely. Does he know who the 4 and 5 seed are? Does he know who the 7 and 8 seeds are right now? I would bet he does. But he's not consumed by it, right? I would fully guess that this is not the messaging to the players. It's about, like we just talked about, doing the day-to-day details to the best of your ability so you're best prepared on Sunday to maximize the opportunities that come your way. The Packers are worried about the Green Bay Packers and maximizing the potential that they have. Now, looking back at last Sunday's game, as I mentioned, I think that that's a kind of a bit of a microcosm of what we've seen from this team specifically since the bye week, where some really good moments, right? Offense gets off to a fast start. I mean, this was a Seattle defense. Let's not discredit that over the last 4 games coming into the Green Bay game during their 4-game win streak, they're giving up only 15 points per game. This was a group playing at a really high level. The Packers, on their first 2 possessions, marched down the field and scored touchdowns. Those were 2 really, really, really impressive drives from the Packers. However, we get to the second half, and again, there's that lull, from lack of a better term. They had I believe the Packers got a field goal on their second possession of the second half. But following that field goal, they went punt, turnover on downs. And of course, we all know you're not going to go out and score every possession. You're not going to string together 10, 12 play drives every possession and put yourself in field goal range. But this offense went from, again, like we talked about the start of the game in the first half, to moving the ball with ease, to, I think they scored on their first 4 possessions, 5 of their first 6. They went from that to not even moving the ball at all. Of those 4 possessions I just listed, punt, turnover on downs, that was 15 plays in total. These were 3, 4. I think the longest possession was that turnover on downs. That was 7 plays. They picked up 1 first down and then went 4 and out afterwards. They went from moving the ball, seemingly doing whatever they wanted, to not being able to do anything. And in part, again, it's the adjustments that Seattle made, right? Like Matt LaFleur talked about it on Monday. Seattle played a lot of cover 0, a lot of, hey, we're not going to let you keep running Josh Jacobs. So it made moving the ball on the ground more difficult. You fall into more of those long down and distance situations. But the consistency component of it, like every team's going to adjust to what you're doing, right? You have to be able to adjust yourself. You have to be able to counter. And the Packers had opportunities. That's the thing. As Matt LaFleur said Monday, it's not as if when the Seahawks were presenting cover 0, trying to sell out to stop the run, that the Packers were caught off guard. They assumed coming out of halftime that they were going to see a lot more of that from Seattle. But when they got those looks, and when those opportunities to take advantage of those looks presented themselves, right? Because if a defense is selling out to stop the run, should be room on the back end or opportunities on the back end for the passing game to take advantage. The Packers weren't able to do that. There was just the play before the Josh Jacobs fumble. Jordan Love was rolling to his right, had Romeo Doubs wide open over the middle, inaccurate throw. Matt LaFleur talked about, I think it was down near the red area, where Christian Watson was running open. Packers weren't able to find him. Jaden Reed slipped coming off of his route. And again, nothing you can really do about that, right? If you slip, you slip. But point being, there were opportunities throughout these possessions that we just described that the Packers weren't able to take advantage of. And again, that's where that consistency component comes from. And again, that's really what they're chasing right now during this final stretch. Yes, they want to go out and clinch a playoff spot on Monday night. Yes, they want to continue to win games, obviously. But we'll talk about here in a second. You want to be playing your best football at the end of the year. And for the Packers to do that, again, goes back to the day-to-day, the finer details, so there's more consistency. So there aren't these type of lulls. Like, these were 4 not great possessions back to back to back to back. And come playoff time, that can be what sends you home. So as I just mentioned, that Seattle game, I thought was a microcosm of what we've seen from this Packers team really since the bye week. A lot of good, but still searching for consistency. And since the bye week, that Chicago game, to where we are now, we've seen different elements of this Packers team, different phases, different units, pick up the slack in really each of those games. Against the Chicago Bears, offense really struggled in the red zone. Defense wasn't holding up very well against the run. Packers found a way to stay in the game, had the lead at the end, but it was a special teams unit that was able to come through for them. Next 2 games, San Francisco and Miami, we saw the Packers leaning heavily into the run game. And really that was the catalyst for the offense, got the offense out to an early lead, gave the defense a lead to play with. And right when a defense is able to play with a lead, they're able to be much more aggressive, take advantage of those situations. So in those 2 games, it was the run game. The Detroit Lions game, passing game in the second half. The running game, Detroit was selling out, saying, no, we're not going to let you get Josh Jacobs and the run game get going. The Packers passing game, as the defense was giving up a lot of yards, points in that game, it was the passing game from Green Bay that kept them in it. And then this past week against Seattle, as we mentioned, offense got off to a fast start, hit that lull in the second half, and it was the defense who came through, right? Specifically the pass rush, Edgerrin Cooper. We discussed just the impact of Cooper in the pass rush in my last video. But in each of those games, you can go pick out different players, different phases, different units that picked up the slack when maybe the offense was struggling or the defense was struggling or whatever it might be. And that's really good. That is extremely, extremely valuable for the Packers as they come into, as we get into the final weeks of the regular season, as the playoffs approach. Because when you get to the playoffs, obviously you're going to be playing best of the best teams within your conference. And what does every team want to do? They want to take away what you do well, right? They want to put you in situations where you're not able to lean on what your bread and butter is. And when you're going against high quality opponents, they're going to do that, right? Sometimes you might be able to overcome it. Sometimes they're going to get the best of you in those situations, but they're going to try to take away what you do well. So when you don't have your A game, you don't have what you can lean on, what your bread and butter is, how are you going to respond, right? Is there some other aspect of your game, offensively, defensively, whatever it might be in that situation, that you can lean on and that can help pick up the slack in those situations? You're going to see new looks, right? They're going to see the defense, offense, whoever it might be, throw something different at you. You're going to get punched in the mouth. You're going to face adversity. That's what the playoffs are. But how quickly you respond, how quickly you adjust in those situations, a lot of times is going to play an important factor in determining the winner of those games. How quickly you can respond in the moment, how quickly you can overcome whatever adversity has been thrown your way in that game. And when we look at those 4 empty possessions against Seattle that we just described, and again, it's not always going to be tough sledding. You're going up against a really good Seattle defense in that game. You're going to be going up against really good defenses in the playoffs. It's not as if you're going to march up and down the field all the time. You're not always going to put up points. We understand that. But 4 possessions in a row with a turnover, 15 total plays, that can be the difference between winning and losing. When you're going up against the Lions, when you're going up against the Eagles, 4 really short possessions back to back to back to back. If you go into that stretch with a lead, it could absolutely be erased. If you go into that stretch and it's a close game, you could find yourself down 10 or 14 points just like that. That's the difference, and that is what the Packers are still working on. That is what the Packers have to avoid moving forward. After the Detroit game, this most recent one, Matt LaFleur discussed how these close matchups in a lot of NFL games are decided by just a few plays. There's a handful of plays each game that they just end up carrying more weight than the other 65, 70 that were ran earlier on. And you never know when they're going to come up. Like, we can look at that Lions game, and obviously they kicked a game winner at the end, and you could say, well, the Lions won on that play, which they did, but you could go back to the first quarter and the Packers were down 10-0, right? What if it was 7-7? You can look at the Lions going 4 for 5 on 4th downs. 2 of them ended up being touchdowns. What if one of those plays ended up differently? What if one of those plays ended up going in Green Bay's direction? What if the Packers didn't have a red zone penalty and were in a better position to score a touchdown at the end of the game? That's where the consistency is needed, because it's not just, all right, it's the 4th quarter, let's buckle down, let's make sure we go and execute at a high level, because the game might not be in reach at that point. The game might have been, those deciding plays we just mentioned, there might have been 4 of them in the previous 3 quarters. So you need to have that consistency component, because again, you don't know when those plays are going to arrive within the game, but when they do, you got to be playing as close to your best football as possible to tilt the momentum, tilt the favor of those plays in your odds, in your direction. Now, having said all that, there is a lot of good from this Packers team. They're 10-4 on the year. I mentioned this after the Lions game. If you went into that Lions game feeling good about this Packers team, and they had won 7 out of 8 going into that game, so I'm going to guess just about everyone did, you should still feel really good about this Packers team. These last 4 games, the offense, they're averaging 32.5 points per game over these last 4 games. Jordan Love is healthy. He's playing really good football right now. Passing game's picking up steam. They have our strong run game to lean on, which has just a massive trickle-down effect to the rest of the offense. Opens up the playbook. It's not a coincidence that with the running game, Josh Jacobs going right now, the Packers leaning on it, that Christian Watson is also just a consistent, seems like on a weekly basis right now, downfield target, and they're capitalizing on those throws. The pass rush, the run game right now, performing really, really well. The pass rush is picking up steam. We're seeing individual players like TJ Slayton, Quay Walker, Edgerrin Cooper playing some of their best football. The cornerback position without Jair Alexander has held its own. There is a lot of good. There is a lot of positives. And as Matt LaFleur said recently, I think this was after a Lions game, he's not discrediting any of that. He recognizes the team that they have, but also understands that they need more consistency, specifically against the best teams, against the Lions, the Eagles, the Vikings, need to be at their best against the NFC's best, because obviously that's who you're going to run into during the playoffs. During the bye week, Brian Gutekunst had mentioned the importance of playing your best football at the end of the season. And we saw this on display last year, right? On paper, Packers were the 7 seed. On paper, the Packers were 9-8. But on the football field, specifically on offense, they were operating as one of the best teams in football. And that led to getting hot down the stretch, a huge win in Dallas. They had the 49ers on the ropes, were on the cusp of going to the NFC Championship game because of how they were operating on the field. And all those struggles, especially during that first half of the season, didn't necessarily matter anymore. What mattered was they got to the playoffs and they were playing their best football. They were operating at a consistent high level. And I don't think anyone, again, 32.5 points per game is what the offense is averaging. But I don't think anyone's going to say that that group right now is operating at its peak, that they're at optimal capacity right now. The Packers are still chasing that, but you should be extremely encouraged by the fact that they're still chasing it, right? Like, do we want to see, would we have loved to have seen them put together the 4 quarters of 60 minutes against Seattle? Of course. Would we like to see them, near their peak right now? And I think they're getting pretty close. Would we like to see that? Of course we would. But if they're putting up almost 33 points per game and we still feel like there's more out there for them, that's exciting. That shows the potential. That shows the ceiling that this Packers team has, that this Packers offense has, and what's still out there for them to go get. So they still have to unlock it, right? They still have to reach that potential to fully recognize what their ceiling can be, to make a run during the postseason. But they're on the right track, right? Doesn't mean they've arrived, but they're on the right track. And circling back to the start of all this, how do you get there? It's the day-to-day. It's the mundane details. How you go about your business, the process that you go through on a daily basis, doing those at a high level consistently to the best of your ability. And then the playoff opportunity that they have to clinch on Sunday, if the Packers can take care of their business effectively in their preparation and during the week, the big picture stuff will eventually start to take care of itself. I appreciate everyone tuning in. And hey, if you've made it this far in the video, you might as well hit like, you might as well hit subscribe. I do greatly appreciate it. Like I said, follow me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel. Find all my work over at ESPNLacrosse.com. Download the 105.5 ESPN Lacrosse app. Until next time, friends, take care.